In every classroom, there are shadows no one dares to see. Mine was forced into light when betrayal stole my peace, deceit shattered our trust, and revenge became the only way to reclaim my child's future. This is my fight for truth, and it's the hardest lesson I've ever learned. They say a parent's love is the safest shelter a child can ever know. I believe that. Raised my son alone, through every triumph and hurt, I built our little world to be bright, loving, safe. Some days I would pause at the kitchen table, watching him fiddle with homework, humming under his breath, perfectly content. On weekends, we'd go to the park, just the two of us. His laughter, once so quick, was my proof that we were doing all right. But life has its shadows. At first, they're invisible. You convince yourself they're just passing clouds, harmless. But the darkness was always there in the corners I didn't want to see. It began so softly, a slight shift in the air. He started forgetting breakfast, leaving the house earlier, mumbling about rushed assignments. I'd hear a half-hearted, "love you," as he slipped through the door. I thought maybe he needed more freedom, more trust. Then came the silences. He'd stay locked in his room for hours, phone tucked close, barely a word between us. My friends said it was just teenage things, that he was becoming his own person. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But mothers feel more than words. One evening, he came home with red-rimmed eyes, his smile forced. I pretended I didn't notice, served dinner, asked about school. His answers were vague, loose fragments that made no sense. Late that night, unable to sleep, I wandered past his door, heard him crying into his pillow. It shattered me. I knew something was wrong. I was afraid to confront the truth. I remember the day everything changed. It was raining outside, a gray Saturday. He was supposed to be at soccer practice, but he'd left his phone on the kitchen counter. I never snooped, never. But that day, something inside me broke. My hand, almost moving on its own, opened his phone. I wish I could say I was searching for nothing, but a mother's fear is a powerful thing. What I found was not a normal message thread. There were texts from his soccer coach, compliments about his mature perspective, invitations to stay late after practice, promises of special opportunities no other boy had. The tone was too familiar, the praise too personal. My breath caught. My world shrank to that tiny glowing screen. Questions collided in my head. Why my son? Why would a trusted adult, someone I greeted every week, speak to him like this? I scrolled further, heart pounding. There were late-night messages, emails, encouragements to always trust me, even if your mom doesn't understand. Appreciation for secrets kept, for loyalty shown. It felt like drowning, a betrayal so deep I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, a cruel joke. But the evidence was there, digital and undeniable. Trembling, I waited for him to come out of his room. I wanted to ask everything. I wanted to scream, to protect, to fix. But when I saw his face, fragile, scared, cornered, I knew I had to move gently. Love demanded patience, even through heartbreak. That night, after he fell asleep, I began my silent war. I backed up every message, every email. I started documenting his moods, his absences, his explanations. I swore to myself, no one would hurt him again. No matter how powerful, no matter how protected, I would not fail him. The fight for truth had begun, and love would be my shield, even if revenge became my sword. The days blurred quickly after that discovery. I kept up the performance of calm, but inside me, every instinct was vibrating with dread. Love, I learned, doesn't destroy suspicion. If anything, it sharpens it. With every odd moment, with every unexplained glance, I felt the shadows move in my own home and in the bright hallways of my son's school. He grew quieter over breakfast. His laughter vanished completely, replaced by forced grins and eyes that wouldn't meet mine. Phone calls, once full of chatter, became one-word silences. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window, lost in a world too heavy for his years. The strange after-school hours turned into a pattern. Sometimes he arrived home blank-faced, sometimes jittery, clutching his bag as if it contained all his secrets. Occasionally, he'd shower twice in a single evening, scrubbing himself raw, emerging pale and distant. I asked gentle questions, hoping for windows into his pain. He always shrugged, said, "I'm fine, Mom," and buried himself in homework he claimed was endless. But the signals were there. Late one night, he left his phone charging in the kitchen. A string of unread messages popped up. One from Coach Daniels, shining like a threat among mundane teenage buzz. "Don't forget, your loyalty means everything to me. Proud of you, always." My stomach twisted. I started watching at soccer games and parent-teacher nights. Before, I'd seen a passionate coach, a man admired by children and trusted by parents. Now I saw something else. Subtle looks exchanged, secret gestures, moments where Coach Daniels seemed to stand just too close. Other parents gushed about him. "He's so inspiring," Mrs. Lane told me at the field one Saturday. I only nodded, keeping my own secrets, praying someone else would notice. But in this world, darkness hides best in the places everyone assumes are safe. I reached out to my son's closest friends, hoping for answers. Danny avoided eye contact but said, "He gets extra practice sometimes." Coach says he's talented. Another friend mumbled, "He's been different, but mostly just tired, I guess." No one wanted to dig deeper. Everyone trusted too easily. I realized then that shadows never work alone. They need silence to thrive. That same night, I started journaling everything. Every odd detail, every stray word, every gut feeling. I would document it all, even if part of me still hoped I was wrong. Eventually, a new fear crept in. What if the truth destroyed more than my son's innocence? What if exposing this darkness would shatter our small community's trust and hope forever? I decided then I would protect my child, even if it meant challenging everything and everyone I'd ever believed in. In the middle of the night, sitting by his bedroom door and listening to his uneven breathing, I whispered to myself, the shadows are moving, but so am I. Some betrayals scream, others move in quietly, one small violation at a time, until something you loved and trusted is suddenly, undeniably, lost. This is how it happened for us. It started as a trickle, a whispered extra credit meeting after school, a soccer practice no one else needed to attend, a Saturday study session with the coach, just the two of them. Each time my son became more distant. Each time I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being overprotective, that our struggle was just the ache of adolescence, not the wound of betrayal. But denial doesn't hold forever. One evening, my son stumbled in late, eyes swollen and cheeks stained. The lines between sweat and tears were blurred, a look no practice could explain. He looked at me and my heart cracked open. Did something happen? I asked, voice trembling. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be flicker behind his eyes, hungry for trust but terrified of the truth. He shook his head. I just want to go to sleep, Mom. He raced up the stairs, burrowing under his covers, shutting out my questions with trembling silence. I spent the night pacing, replaying every odd moment, every red flag I'd ignored. I knew. My trust had been shattered long before I'd let myself acknowledge it. I dug through practice schedules and teacher emails, my hands shaking. There it was in plain sight. Too many excuses for one-on-one time, praise that crossed boundaries, messages sent at inappropriate hours, and as if confirmation didn't already burn, a message from Coach Daniels to my son. No one understands us like I do. You can talk to me about anything, especially the things you can't tell your mom. 1,000 alarms rang in my head. How would I let this go on? How had I not seen that the man I greeted at every game, the man who called me super mom, was exacting a silent betrayal against my family? At breakfast the next morning, I tried to steady my voice. Are you okay? Is everything with Coach all right? His hands shook, milk nearly spilling from his glass. He says I'm special, he mumbled. He says I have to prove how loyal I am if I want to keep my spot. He says if I talk to you, I'll mess things up for everyone. My skin went cold. This wasn't just heartbreak, this was horror. Grooming and manipulation in its ugliest form. I held his hand across the table. No matter what he says, you haven't done anything wrong. I love you. I will always believe you. Tears ran silently down his cheeks. Trust, once gifted so freely, was the weapon that had cut us open. I realized then that my fight was no longer one of suspicion or hope. It was the raw battle against a calculated predatory betrayal, and my son, my precious child, was caught in its grip. As I cradled him that night, holding his trembling shoulders against my chest, I vowed that I would move heaven and earth to undo the damage done. He wasn't just my child. He was my whole world. And I would not let him be lost to the darkness that betrayed us both. There are heartbreaks you see coming, and betrayals that wear disguises so convincing, you doubt your own instincts. For weeks, I lived in the tension between panic and disbelief. Surely I was mistaken. Surely the man admired by parents and beloved by the school could not be the source of such horror. But deceit wears a friendly smile. At first, Coach Daniels grew bolder in plain sight. He'd praise my son in public, call him gifted, hand him special snacks after practice that no one else received. He started volunteering for rides, always finding reasons to keep my son after hours. Parents saw a mentor, school saw a role model. Only I saw the cracks in his perfect mask. I tried speaking to the principal, my voice trembling. They reassured me. Coach is just passionate about youth development. I wanted to scream. Was I the only one who felt the chill behind his charm? Back home, my son grew more withdrawn. His light dimmed, replaced by a cautious, tired soul that barely resembled the boy I raised. One day, Coach showed up at our door. Just wanted to drop off some encouragement, he said, handing a wrapped box to my son. Inside, expensive soccer gear, a personalized jersey. I watched Coach's eyes linger too long on my son's smile, saw the way my son flinched, forcing gratitude through clenched teeth. And in that moment, the mask slipped. I saw calculation in every gesture, how he made my son feel special, isolated him from friends, made secrets seem like privileges. Every sign was a warning. Private gifts, late-night messages, criticizing my concerns to school staff, convincing them I was overreacting. It crashed over me. His authority was his weapon. His reputation protected him, gave him space to deepen the manipulation. I felt horror, but also fury. How many families lived in blindness because the abuser hid in plain sight? That night, my son confessed in a whisper. He says you wouldn't understand, that other kids just get jealous, that our bond is special. I held him and let him cry, promising again, no matter what he says, I'm here. The truth will come out. You are not alone. Now the fight was clear. The mask had finally slipped, and I saw the monster underneath. But to expose him, I would need patience, courage, and every ounce of love I had left. The weeks after my son's secret came to light were a blur of shattered routines. The laughter was gone from our home. Dinner conversations, once full of silly stories and dreams, dissolved into uneasy silence. Each of us lost behind fortress walls of pain. He withdrew into himself. His room became an island I could barely approach. Even hugs felt fragile, as if my touch risked breaking him further. I kept reaching, kept asking, do you want to talk? But most days he was unreachable, his eyes shadowed by fear, confusion, and shame. I tried to rally our small family, grandparents, cousins, aunts, hoping their warmth would coax him back, but everyone struggled with what to say. There was a shame that saturated the air, a sense that we'd all failed to protect him, each blaming themselves in silent isolation. I questioned everything about myself as a parent. Had I trusted too blindly? Why hadn't I seen the signs? At night, guilt gnawed at me, replaying every missed signal, every moment I'd waved off as just teenage moodiness. My search for answers grew frantic. Google became my late-night companion, endless pages about trauma, abuse, recovery, therapy. I read stories of children who'd pulled through, families who'd rebuilt after the worst. But for every hopeful account, there was a horror story. Children lost in depression, families split by blame, innocence shattered beyond repair. My son's suffering invaded everything. He failed school assignments he used to ace. Nightmares woke him screaming. He avoided soccer, avoided friends, avoided me. I learned how trauma rewires the soul, how survivors often blame themselves, how guilt and fear burrow deeper with every unspoken word. Therapists told me recovery was possible, but slow. They spoke about the courage it takes to face trauma. They taught me, patiently, that my job now was to be a constant, never pushing too hard, always available, always loving, even when love seemed powerless. I found support from other parents, from advocates, from survivors. They gave advice and comfort, but most of all, they gave me hope that someday bonds battered by betrayal could be rewoven. Not perfectly, but strongly enough to hold us up. In those long weeks, I learned healing is nonlinear. Guilt and grief isolate, but community helps. The fight is never just for justice. It is for peace. Inside the family and within yourself, I promised my son over and over, you are loved. This wasn't your fault. Our family is yours. Always. Even when rage and pain made us strangers, the search for answers kept our hearts beating together, unwilling to surrender, searching for the light that we still believed might return. The days blurred into each other. Fear and guilt tangled with a new and powerful emotion. Rage. Rage at Coach Daniels, who used trust as a weapon. Rage at the school, whose glass doors and welcoming faces had sheltered darkness. Rage at myself. For every moment I'd tried to believe things would just get better. That rage became fuel. I started planning, not with panic, but with a desperate, methodical anger. Every piece of evidence became precious. I backed up messages, emails, receipts for gifts, notes of anything odd. I kept a log, what my son said, what other kids whispered, what adults brushed off as passion for teaching. Every gut feeling, every trembling confession, I documented with a clarity that surprised even me. I knew reporting him wouldn't be simple. Coach Daniels was protected, admired by parents, insulated by his long service, but I was no longer afraid. My pain had forged resolve. I began to network quietly, reaching out to other parents, listening for any sign their children had suffered too. Some confided in me. My daughter got late-night messages, but she was embarrassed, said nothing happened. Others didn't want to talk, terrified their complaints would be punished. I sought legal advice and support groups for families dealing with child abuse. They warned me, justice for victims is never quick, never simple. They reminded me my voice mattered. My son's healing mattered even more. I built a plan that shielded him from trauma wherever possible. Therapy, safe spaces, gentle conversations, and constant reminders that he was believed and loved. Rage kept me moving when exhaustion wanted to win. I volunteered for school events simply to keep watch. I documented every interaction I saw, every uneasy smile exchanged in hallways. The fear that Coach would retaliate never left, but my need for justice was stronger. The pain wasn't gone. It was raw, pulsing, but it became a blade I wielded in the fight for my child. Revenge wasn't about hurting Coach Daniels. It was about exposing the truth, making sure his mask shattered for everyone to see. If the system failed, I would not. As the days passed, my determination became a shield for my son's broken peace. I promised him, and myself, we will not be victims forever. Revenge now had a name. Justice. The war I faced wasn't loud. It had no banners or battle cries. It crept in quiet halls, whispered in hidden messages, and lingered behind closed doors. My fight was a game of shadows and silence. Carefully watching without being seen, gathering evidence one fragile piece at a time, dancing between fear for my son and the cold hope for justice. Volunteering at the school was my first step into this covert battlefield. Every morning, I sat near the office, pretending to file papers or answer calls, but my eyes were scanning hallways, watching who lingered around my son. I learned to read subtle signs, the flicker of a glance between my son and Coach Daniels, a slight hesitation before a call was accepted, secret meetings in empty classrooms. Each moment felt like walking a knife's edge. One wrong step could shatter everything. I kept meticulous notes, dates, times, conversations overheard, odd behaviors, every detail lined up like pieces of a puzzle. I backed up any evidence I could find, screenshots of late-night texts, photos of gifts others didn't notice, recordings made with hidden apps on my son's phone. Fear whispered, what if they discover what you're doing? What if retaliation comes? But love roared louder. School administrators smiled politely during meetings, but steered conversations away the moment abuse was mentioned. Teacher-student relationships are complicated, they said. Let's focus on your son's academic performance. Their words felt like shields protecting the predator's mask. I realized this wasn't just a battle for my son. It was a fight against a system adept at quieting voices like mine, pushing pain under the rug so polished, it reflected no cracks. I found allies in unexpected places. Other parents who whispered their own stories of worry and fear but lacked proof or courage to speak up. Teachers who offered quiet support yet feared retaliation. Counselors who listened but walked a tightrope between silence and advocacy. Together, we formed our own web of truth, fragile but growing stronger with each shared story and piece of proof. As the quiet war stretched on, exhaustion clawed at my mind. But every moment spent gathering evidence, every whispered conversation in shadowed corners fueled my resolve. We would break the silence. We would strip away the mask, and we would reclaim our children's safety, no matter the cost. Every moment brought us closer to the edge of revelation. My plans, my networks, my evidence, all pointed to one inexorable truth. This darkness would not hide forever. But the closer I got, the heavier the air became. Walls moved in, walls built by fear, power, and silence. School staff smiled in my face, but behind those smiles were cold whispers and warning glances. Voices I couldn't name murmured threats disguised as advice. Be careful. Tread lightly. You don't want to ruin a career. The noose was tightening fast, but so was my grip on the truth. I watched my son more closely than ever. He was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but his bravery held firm. He resisted every attempt to silence him, every manipulation designed to blame, isolate, or confuse. Our quiet alliance grew into a fortress built from courage and transparent truth. Dates were marked on calendars, parent-teacher conferences scheduled with tense uncertainty. Every meeting felt like walking into a courtroom, where I was both witness and defendant. But we clung to our evidence, screenshots, recordings, testimonies from other parents who started to step forward. Fear tried to steal my voice, but rage kept it alive. Every late-night message we uncovered, every secret meeting caught on camera, pulled the mask further apart. The predator's defenses wavered, small cracks appearing for the first time. The community began to murmur, not yet with certainty, but with growing doubt. Questions surfaced quietly at PTA meetings, in hushed hallway conversations. The noose we'd woven, the web of truth, was binding tighter. At home, I held my son when sleep eluded him. We shared moments of terror, but also hope. Hope that this fight would not be in vain. Hope that the darkness could be stripped away and replaced with justice. As the day of confrontation approached, when evidence would need to stand in the light, I steeled myself. For this battle would not only be about exposing what was wrong, it would be about reclaiming our dignity, our safety, our future. And I was ready to see the mask fall. The day justice collided with betrayal was unlike any day before. Months of silent struggle, hidden cameras, whispered alliances, and painstaking documentation all led to this moment. A moment tinged with fear, hope, and the weight of truths too long concealed. By now our evidence was a fortress. Screenshots and recordings showing coercion, threats, gifts, and lies. Testimonies from other parents and students, quiet voices growing louder with courage, and the faint but unbreakable hope that the truth, once exposed, could topple even the most protected giants. I remember walking into that meeting room, papers in my trembling hand, and my son close beside me, eyes bright with pain and resolve. The principal's office, once a place of dull conversations, felt charged like the eye of a storm. The school administration tried to mask concern with politeness, but I saw through it. They knew too well the stakes. That Coach Daniels wasn't just any teacher. His family had influence. Connections threaded through the fabric of the school and police. This was no ordinary accusation. This was a reckoning. The testimony began. My son spoke, voice shaking yet clear, describing secrets coaxed from innocence, threats hidden beneath concern, attempts to coerce silence with promises and fear. One by one, other families stepped forward, sharing fears they'd bottled in silence. Coach Daniels protested, denying, deflecting, painting himself as a victim of malicious gossip. But the evidence spoke louder. Documents, recordings, photos stacked like bricks in an unbreakable wall. As the investigation unfolded, I watched power crumble. The school distanced themselves, but we knew the damage ran deep. Community whispers turned into questions, and questions into demands. The local police stepped in, slow-moving but inevitable. Finally, the law began its long, hard work. At home, the tension remained high. The distance between fear and relief was narrow. For my son, for me, for all of us. But for the first time in long months, the darkest shadows began to retreat. Justice demanded its due, not just for retribution, but for healing. And with it came the promise that one day the wounds would not define us. The storm had passed, or so they said. But anyone who's lived through darkness knows the shadows don't disappear overnight. They shrink. They whisper. They leave scars, some visible, most hidden. For my son and me, the journey to healing was long and winding. Therapy sessions unveiled pain too deep for words, tears that cleansed but also reminded, and silences that spoke volumes. Yet, through the mud, small blooms of strength began to rise. Slowly, we learned to trust again, ourselves, each other, the world. We turned wounds into lessons, betrayal into wisdom. No longer victims of darkness, we became advocates for light. Our story became one not just of survival, but of rebirth. I trained as a support advocate to help families walking the same harrowing paths we did. My son found his voice in groups of survivors, teaching, speaking, healing. Together, we built something stronger than pain, a community bound by courage and hope. The scars remained, yes, but they became a map, tracing the distance we traveled. They marked the places where love refused to break, where justice fought to hold, where truth shattered silence. Sometimes people ask if I forgive. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. But I have found peace in knowing that what tried to destroy us only forced us to rise higher. The classroom that once hid shadows is no longer a place of fear. It is a space of resilience, education, and hope. And our fight? It lives on in every parent who refuses to stay silent, in every child who finds protection, in every whisper of truth daring to be heard. This is not just my story. It's the story of countless families fighting shadows hidden behind trusted faces. And it is a call to the world. Look closer, listen harder, and never ever let the light be swallowed by darkness. From the ruins of our pain, we rebuilt our lives, stronger, wiser, unbroken. And in our scars, we carry the power to change the world.